Hi everyone, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra here in a different spot. You're actually in Casa de Korea and here with Terry Johnson from Firearms Legal Protection. Today we had an officer involved shooting on the channel that was a lot of rounds headed downrange.
A lot of rounds.
A lot of rounds. And I want to talk to Terry about the difference between an officer's qualified immunity and a private citizen's individual accountability. Today's video is brought to us by Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners with a 24/7 emergency hotline and plans designed specifically for self-defenders. They are offering a discount on their plan to Ask fans, so hit the link in the description for that. So Terry, again, I appreciate you and Firearms Legal Protection for sponsoring these videos and for standing behind what we do at Active Self-Protection every day.
Thank you very much. You know, John, as we talked many times, you know, we want to make sure your subscribers are educated and protected. And the best way to get educated is to watch the videos, and the best way to get protected is to, you know, hit the link and go to Firearms Legal Protection.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think certainly in this day and age, you have to have somebody standing behind you because your chances of being prosecuted, of needing representation are high.
Extremely.
So in particular here, obviously what we had is we had officers that were, you know, go watch the original, right? Link in the description, and you see these officers, they got a guy in a stolen car, they know he's a bad dude, he jumps out, pointing a gun at them, shooting at them, so they jump out, start, you know, and they go to guns, right? It's like, It's always sunny in Philadelphia. So anyways, they started blasting. The big thing that stood out to me, of course, was that they hit a bystander's SUV with a bunch of rounds.
And people were in it.
Yeah, with people in it. Thankfully, nobody harmed, nobody hurt. Cars can be fixed, right? Whatever. And then that guy eventually goes down. But I mean, gracious sakes, it seems to me they fired dozens and dozens of rounds at the guy.
Yeah, everybody was shooting. I don't know what they were shooting at, but
they were shooting. They were shooting.
Right.
So, I mean, now we've already talked on the channel at times about qualified immunity and what that means. And I want to see if I understand it correctly from your perspective, that when an officer's acting in their official capacity, then we stand behind them as a society, as a community, and say, we'll take the liability, not you personally.
Correct. So it's difficult, if you think about some of the things that have happened. If you sue an officer, you could potentially sue him in his capacity as an officer and as an individual. So let me give you a quick example. Officer writes me a ticket and I want to fight with the officer, and I basically say, hey, you know what, I'm going to sue you, which you really can't do for writing a ticket. That's how I'm just making this up, just so everybody knows. If I sue him as Police Officer Smith, the city stands behind him.
Right.
But if he does something so egregious, and let's say I sue him in his individual capacity, I'm saying at that point, you know what, this was so bad, I'm going to sue him as an individual. So now the city or whoever may not stand behind him, but in most cases, the city and everybody else will stand behind him unless this officer has done something like it's so egregious. And
so, I mean, that's why it's qualified, right? Like a judge has complete immunity. That they don't even have a qualification in their immunity. What they do in an act as a judge, they cannot be sued personally for. Period.
Correct.
Full stop.
That is
right?
correct.
That's full immunity, right? That's that old school, like, you know, if you remember back from Lethal Weapon, you know, diplomatic immunity, you know, just been revoked, you know, Murtaugh, old school 80s pop culture reference. But a police officer's immunity is qualified. It has an end.
It does have an end.
Yeah.
Correct. And the thing about that is, unlike the judge, like you said, they just can't go out and do anything.
Right.
And it can be taken away from them.
However, though, it does seem to me that, of course, I don't have that as a private citizen.
No, you don't.
And so I know a lot of my viewers are get a feel that feels unfair, that an officer can get away with bad conduct with just, I mean, shooting all over the place like we saw in that video. And I want to say in good faith, I don't think the officers were trying to be negligent. I think guys shooting at them, they're you know, trying to defend themselves and everybody else around them. They just weren't very good marksmen.
Right.
But if I do that as a private citizen, man, I could be on the hook for recklessness, for negligence. And even if an officer even hits somebody and they weren't found to be outside of policy, they're not going to be held personally accountable for that.
Correct.
But I sure am.
Correct. And here's the thing. You got to remember, we put the police on the street in order to protect us. They have a higher level of risk. And what do I mean by that? In other words, you pick up no one's going to pick up the phone and call John Correa and say, John, someone just broke into my house. The intruder's still here. Get over here.
Right.
They're going to call the police. They're employed, and as a way of making sure that they're protected, we give them the qualified immunity.
I mean, straight up, if one of my loved ones called me and said, John, there's a burglar in my house, come help me, I'm going to be like, no, call the cops. Why are you calling me? Call 911.
Right, because calling you don't have, and I hate to say this to you, but you don't have the training per se that a police, well, he does, but we're just.
So I don't have a training in law enforcement that
Correct.
a law enforcement officer does. I certainly have a training in handgun skills and all those things.
And probably a lot better than most officers, and that's not a knock against the police officers, but this is what you do for a living.
Yeah. But I don't have the responsibility they have. I don't have
Correct.
to show up.
You are inserting yourself into a situation which is completely different than what the police do. The police are there to protect and serve, and they have certain responsibilities that go on as it relates to that. You inserting yourself into a situation is completely different than the police coming in. I mean, even look at it from private security, okay? If you take private security, they don't even have the same immunity, the qualified immunity that the police officers do.
Right.
Because again, they are private, even though they're private citizens, they may be employed in a certain level to protect, but it will come nowhere near qualified immunity.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously we're not standing behind a private security company as a society, as a community, and saying, because I mean, really, when you call 911, you're saying, hey, wait a minute, I need somebody here to outsource my violence to. And we as a community, we say, no, we're forcing that person, that law enforcement officer to go.
Absolutely. And think about Denver for a minute, okay? The situation out there where a news station hired a private security guard to protect individuals at the news station, and look how that went.
Oh boy,
it didn't go well.
No.
And think about this. If they called the police in the same situation to say, hey, we need somebody here just to crowd control to protect our people, if things happened the exact same way, you'd have some different results.
But so let's go back to this situation where we see officers kind of shooting all over the place, though. I guess we, and I think it's a legit question to ask. Is it fair that they get a pass for, blasting somebody's car up all the heck, and I don't?
I'm not going to call it a pass, because at the end of the day, the owner of the car is going to get their car fixed probably by the city. I think it was Sacramento in this case.
Yeah.
But they're going to say, hey, you broke out my windows. We need you to fix X, Y, and Z. If it's you're going to face criminal charges because, as we always talk about, number one, you're responsible for every round that comes out of that firearm. Mm-hmm. Okay, you don't have to walk around with a firearm. It's a choice.
And I don't have to pull somebody over who is driving a stolen car.
And you don't have to chase them down the street.
Right.
So because all of these things are going on, the police get, I'm not going to call it a pass. What they do get is a different level of protection because of the duties that they have to perform.
So it seems to me that the answer here is every time I have an increase in responsibility, I get an increase in authority concomitant to that.
In terms of policing, that is correct. Because, again, here's something you've said many times on your channel, the police are, if you run into a situation, the police are actually, they're not retreating. They don't look for...
Yeah, they're moving in.
Right. They don't look for a way out, even though in some states you don't have a duty to retreat. But what are the police doing? They are there specifically to, take care of a situation. And it gets sorted out later on in court. But quite honestly, they go in, and we as citizens, we're looking to get out.
I think that's a big distinction because, again, if I say, wait a minute, as a private citizen, I'm trying to break contact. If somebody's a deadly threat to me and mine, I want to get away from that as fast as I can. But a police officer, their mission is different. Their mission is to apprehend criminals and take them into custody. And so because of that, they have to push and go forward where I would certainly go backward.
And I'm even going to take it a step further. If you think sometimes of off-duty officers, a lot of times in most states, if a felony is being committed in their presence, they still have the authority to act as an officer.
Right.
Even though they may be in a completely different city, county, somewhere else, north, south in the state, they still have that authority because, again, of the training, the expertise, and other things that the laws have given them.
So I think this is the big thing, and I think everybody should pay attention to this, that it's all about mission. Mission drives tactics, techniques, and procedures. And because of that, because the mission of law enforcement we have given them is to apprehend criminals, then we have accepted the responsibility if they have a liability in the faithful performance of their duty.
And for one other thing, I just want to bring up, if you talk about the use of lethal force and what an officer, the steps an officer has to take before he or she uses lethal force, they're a lot different than they are as a private citizen. Because as a private citizen, our mere presence isn't going to de-escalate something. Okay?
Right. Our mere presence isn't a use of force.
No, but
the Supreme Court has said the mere presence of an officer is a use of force.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, when you start looking at how all these things lay out, I completely understand why they have qualified immunity.
So I get it, and I understand that where you start going, wait a minute, it's not fair that a cop can, miss and beat someone's car up and not be accountable for it. But again, mission then drives tactics, techniques, and procedures, and authority and liability. And since our missions are different, our outcomes are different. Terry, appreciate the education.
Thank you.